This is In the Middle with Josh and Sarah Siders. We get it. You're probably going through something that's asking you to dig deep, think differently, and hold on against the odds.
So these are our thoughts about starting new things, shutting some things down, and being with you right there in the middle.
Welcome back to the In the Middle podcast, the podcast for those of us who haven't arrived yet. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Josh. So glad to have you with us.
Yes, we're back for another exciting episode.
Yeah.
It's funny when we get on the same page. So today's episode is a topic that we both kind of like settled on like on our own. We were both thinking about it. So it's kind of cool. So we'll get to that in a minute. But we have a sponsor, of course, for today. So who's our sponsor?
Our sponsor is Throwback Hits.
Oh, yeah?
Throwback Hits. Yeah. For those times where you just need to be swept back into nostalgia and you take it away from your current circumstance.
Oh.
So, funny story. I was at the gym today and I was, getting ready at the end, and Pearl Jam Alive comes on, and it whisked me away to the mid-90s.
Goodness.
It was magical.
That is so great. Okay, so if you were in my women's group, the Flourish community, we are asking this question in the introduction questionnaire, and it's like, what's your like go-to 80s or 90s band?
Yeah.
That you like listen to when you feel nostalgic or you need to pick me up. And I totally said Dave Matthews, like Under the Table and Dreaming.
Oh yeah.
Like
that
that felt like, even though my life was kind of chaotic back then, there's something about it that was so great. I have some great memories.
Yeah.
Is Pearl Jam is like your go-to, right?
I think so. Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. That's so funny. Yay. Thank you, Throwback Hits.
That's right. Thank you
for bringing us into the moments that we miss. I think it's just so much about like the fact that you had way less problems and way more optimism.
Oh yeah.
Naivety,
so?
Right? I think that like you connect the music with that.
Yeah, like the world seems simpler.
The sense of like possibility and that's always there.
Yeah, right.
But less heartache, more chaos though, man. I feel like I had more chaos. Anyway, so let's get into it. Today's episode topic is how to reinvent yourself. And we're going to give you the 3 steps. I'm just kidding. We're not going to do that because that would be crazy for us to be so audacious. But we want to talk through it because it's a thing. It's like a way of interpreting what you do in midlife.
I think it's super important.
It's not like, I don't know. I feel like, so one thing I would be curious to hear from you is where you have like at points in your life where you tried to reinvent yourself, like maybe a small reinvention, a little rebrand, if you will.
Yeah.
Do you have times of your life where you look back and you go, oh,
yeah,
I did that. What was where, when, and where, and how?
College is pretty normal.
Yeah. Yes.
Maybe once in high school.
Okay. You did a rebrand in high school.
Kind of, not really. Are you speaking me specifically, or kind of like common times?
Oh no, I'm talking about you specifically.
Yeah, definitely college, and then I had a time in my early days as a pastor where I, just kind of consciously like switched up some things and. Yeah, just put on a more professional hat, that sort of thing.
Do you remember when that was?
Like 2012, 2013.
2012. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I remember doing a conscious kind of, I'm calling it a rebrand because that's like a pop culture reference for like, reinventing yourself. But these kind of are like foreshadowing, I think.
Sure.
Doing it in college. I remember in high school, I was so anxious and awkward because I couldn't figure social stuff out. And so I just really struggled to fit in, and it felt like when I was starting college, I had this fresh start, like nobody knew me and I could show up in a way. So that was cool. And I had a lot to learn there, but that was cool. And then in 2017, when I started my practice, I did like a Pinterest board. And I was like, okay, here's my fashion like that I want to come across. And then I started my business, And I was like, okay, I had a friend of mine who is a designer calligrapher design me my own font and like design a whole brand for me. And it was like colors and a style. And it was so cool.
Yeah.
I felt like I was really intentionally designing a life for myself. And then I started kind of like putting these things in, in place in my behavior that helped to do that. So I feel like in some ways I was practicing for the midlife reinvention, but it's more holistic.
Yeah, it's like kind of like that, but not like that. And
yes.
For me, this comes from a book that I'm reading, James Hollis, Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life. And he gives this just brief roadmap that you can kind of plot your way through the turn in midlife.
Yeah.
So step one is, and it can be sort of related to the stages of grief too.
Yeah.
So step one is denial. Like everything's fine. I'm fine. Nothing is different. You kind of get the dog in the burning room. Like, this is fine.
Everything's great.
So that's step one is like, it hasn't sunk in yet that this is a significant change that you're going through. Step two is you double down on your previous season's tools.
Okay.
So you work harder, you kind of go, you bear down and go, okay, I got this. I know how to do this. I've been here before.
Yes.
Stage 3 is your coping stage. It's sort of where it's sinking in that what got you here won't get you there. And you're in the in-between. And so all the pressures are pressing in on you. You're coping through maybe substance abuse, maybe procrastination, apathy, sort of that thing. You're having to deal with it without having any relief or release.
Yeah.
It's interesting because that third step is where that's what most people call the midlife crisis.
Okay.
Right. It's people coping with the change that they're having to go through.
Yep.
But that's, again, a midlife crisis, whatever that means for our generation.
Yeah.
That's only one step on the 4-step process. The 4th step is you get new tools. Like you learn the things, you accept the things that are necessary to venture into the second half of life.
Okay.
And so I think that's where this reinvention comes in. Stage 4 is you've gone through the first 3 steps, right? And now it's like, okay, I need a new support system. I need new tools. I need a new mindset. I need to get in touch with my true self, my true calling, things like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, what we're talking about here, how to reinvent yourself for the second half of life.
Yeah, I think that people, like you're talking about how to reinvent yourself, people may not, they might be at a certain stage. So like think about, as you're listening, like what stage you might be at. What's interesting about that third stage of like the crisis, the poor coping skills, disrupting your marriage, addictive behaviors, all of that, like that's kind of like the symptoms emerging above the surface.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, like anyone who's paying attention doesn't go, this person suddenly has an alcohol problem. Just suddenly, out of the blue. Came from nowhere.
Can explain it.
It's like there's all these, like you talked about, there's this feeling of, I'm sure it's fine. It's, this isn't really happening, or trying all the tools you used before.
Yeah.
Because of course, right? Like, I'm just going to work harder.
Yeah.
And then that feeling of like, wait, this isn't working anymore. I mean, oh my gosh, how many times have we said on this podcast and all these places, like the buttons that worked before don't work, the formulas break.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's what you feel. And it just like all the things that you've tried in the past don't work. And so you're just like, what do I do now? And I think so many people, who are part of this podcast community and just like friends of ours, part of our circles, like would relate to that, that feeling like, what do I do? And I know for us, we've observed many responses to this.
Absolutely.
That people get to this, if you use the critical journey lens, they get to the wall, they get to this James Hollis, stage 3, I'm here and I'm coping and I'm using all my tools. and they kind of like will not sit with the discomfort.
Yeah.
And they'll go, you know what? I think I'm just gonna slide back
Yep.
to maybe
Yep.
some, some challenges that I can handle,
Yeah.
or viewing the world through this previous lens, because it's too much to understand and to like wrestle with. Man,
we call those self-limiting beliefs.
okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what
true.
it'd be, is like,
yeah.
I am comfortable in the self-limitation of what I'm used to and what I'm comfortable with. And so that's like, when people are trying to get out of that, they have to actually confront those things.
Yeah.
They need a coach, they need a guide, they need a spiritual director, they need a therapist to confront those things. Because really, that step 3 or stage 3 or whatever it's called, it's change. And that's what's scary for people.
Yeah.
It's change.
It's like, I have to change.
I have to be willing to change anything and everything that is going to grow me up, to, continue me on this journey. And that's scary. It could be a job change. Mm-hmm. It could be a move. It could be, you take on some big project that you've been putting off and that you don't know how to do. And it's a lot of those things about having to confront your brokenness, your shame, your, and then actually let go of some things too. Let go of the things that hindered you, that were the props holding you up. It's just change. Yeah. And it's scary. Yeah. It's scary for people who have, probably come through some kind of like season of self-sufficiency, and like, hey, I got this. Yep. Okay, I got this. Kids are raised. Yep. Marriage is solid. Faith is good. And having to like ask hard questions about that stuff, and then rock the boat on like, you live in an ecosystem where things and people benefit from you being a certain way. Yeah. And let's just say a marriage, right? Yep. It should be two people growing together into old age. But what happens when one spouse upsets the apple cart and says, I'm kind of thinking of like taking a pay cut to take this job, or, hey, I'm kind of like confronting some family of origin stuff, and I actually don't like it when you talk to me like that. You're upsetting the status quo, and to have to confront that again is really scary. Yeah, because you get the full force of the system pushing back on you to stay the same. And so that is a lot of the pressure of like, do I want to stay the same? Do I want to risk change? Do I, yeah. Yeah.
I know we talked about this before, and I think there's like also the feeling of what can I control in this reinvention? Like, if I get to this place where the buttons don't work anymore, that the things I used to do that, in the first half of life, I'm being remade, right? Like this midlife, crunch is intended to create a metamorphosis. But it's like, what is, I think this is a question that's just always before us. What's my participation in this, right? Because I live in a world that has the problems and challenges. I live in a certain culture. I live in a town that has certain values. We talk about Midwestern nice, and there's a certain standard of living, and there's certain opportunities. Yeah,
and work hard and earn your keep.
Yeah. So like the values of this place, the opportunities of the place, the friends that I've had for a long time, the kind of things that are available to me, that like, I'm making this change, whatever that is, in the middle of those things. Right. Some of those things I can control. Some of them I can't. Right. And I think that's always a question I have when I'm looking at growth, is like, what is my participation in this process? Because there are like, God level factors that, things that God would do, like, that you could never make happen. Right. And then there's just the stuff, that the bad luck, the circumstances, stuff that's going to happen anyway. And then there's like the force that you can impose on it. And what I experienced, kind of rounding out my late 30s into my early 40s, was this feeling that I did not have the ability to impose my will on my life anymore. And maybe it was just like the old way, but like, I didn't feel that I could make things happen. Yeah. And so even taking the risk to start my practice back up felt like I was pushing against that. Yeah. That like feeling like, oh, I can't make anything happen. I don't know how to to win. I don't know how to succeed.
Yeah. So you're saying there's kind of this tension of like in midlife, you're learning what to let go of control over.
Yeah.
But also I have some input influence
Yes.
into this reinventing myself.
Yes.
Becoming who I'm supposed to be.
Yes.
Moving on in the
yes.
I don't know, timing or whatever that I'm supposed to.
Like
I think that
the
is a tension.
serenity prayer, right?
Yeah,
like
totally.
letting, what is it that I hold on to?
Yeah.
And you know, that's what I asked my friends. I wanted to pull on this story, which I've said before.
Well, before we get there,
okay.
I think like you're going to shift into how to reinvent yourself. So I want to make that really, I want to make that shift.
Yeah. Like a little segue here there for those listening.
So I think we're like identifying,
you
know, and you're going to tell this story. We have some input, influence, control, and there's a whole lot of that we don't. And finding out which of that lane, you know, which is your lane, which is your responsibility, brings a lot of peace versus the anxiety of I feel out of control everywhere.
Yeah.
So with that, and about to get to your story, I think we have a few things of just what are those specific things to look to say, okay, if you're tapping into your true self, if you're letting the false self go, that, you know, whatever the family of origin that you grew up in or culture has imposed on you or what you thought success and achievement look like, this is the true self. This is how I'm made. This is how I function.
Yeah.
Not perfectly, but in my best ability to know myself and stop kind of self-deceiving myself. This is who I am. What are some of those areas to look to reinvent yourself in midlife? And so with that, tell your story. That's really good. Oh
man, there's so many, like, I feel like there's a lot of angles here. So this is just like I don't know that I would say this is a how-to, but something that I was grateful for was when I turned 40, and we've talked about this ritual before. When I turned 40, it was still like COVID era. And so I asked like a handful of good friends, that like a very tiny handful of good friends that I'd had in my life for a long time. And I said, hey, will you write me a letter? And in this letter, tell me what you want me to leave behind in my first half of life and what I should carry forward. And that was really like a profound thing to do because I was making up my own ritual. Nobody taught me to do that. But I just had this feeling like this is a crossing over point. And so, you know, in the ritual, I crossed over this like, you know, stream portion of the North Fork of the Snake River in Colorado. And you guys were on one side, I was on the other. I like walked through, you know, in my chacos, and you know, because I was like, I'm gonna make a real ritual here. And so get to the other side, I opened up these letters from my friends, and you and I read those, and that was really cool. It was really meaningful, and I think it was like really moved by how well my friends knew me. Like I still think back to some of the things that they said, and like how they spoke to me about like, I hope you do this in the second half. Like it has stayed with me. It felt like it was like pressing into my soul in a shaping way. And that wasn't something that I necessarily could have done myself. So I think sometimes we don't have, we talk a lot about blind spots. Sometimes our blind spots are to where we need to change. Sometimes it's to our own greatness, and sometimes it's to our failures or, you know, bad habits. And I just was really grateful that some of them provided like very comprehensive views of me that were really gentle and encouraging, but also like, yep, you know, this is something that you need to work on.
Yeah.
And so I think like having people, it would be easy to just, you know, go on a personal retreat and use Chat GPT and read a book on something, some self-help books, and try to do it on your own. And I don't think you should. I think this has to be a group effort.
Yeah, I think that's so good. So having people around you who kind of see parts of you better than you can see yourself, and
it's really vulnerable though.
It's very vulnerable.
Like who has friends like this?
Well,
I mean,
maybe you know, it's like you're afraid they're going to tell you something that you shouldn't hear, or that's wrong, or you know, lead you in a direction you're not supposed to go. But like actually having true friends like that, they can see your blind spots and love you into the next season. is invaluable.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well said.
It was really good. And I mean, I do recommend it. Like maybe, I don't know what, your friend's situation is, as you're listening, but maybe it's a close coworker, maybe it's somebody in your church, like a leader, a trusted person. Like, I mean, these people have been in my life for a long time, and I really appreciated, it's like
Yeah.
they know me really well. They
Yeah.
knew me for almost 30 years. So, anyways, yeah, that was meaningful. Like having people speak into it.
It's good.
That question, like, what should I leave behind and what should I take forward?
Yeah.
To me, is
Really
a
good.
really nice, like, cutoff
Mhm.
question.
Right. It's good.
And I needed that.
Yeah, that's good. Well, for me, I would say one of the things that helps, can help you reinvent yourself is, like upgrading your operating system. Like, how do you define success? Right?
Wow. Yeah.
Like what propels you forward? And I think for so many of us, it's about achievement.
Yep.
It's about attaining things.
Yeah.
It's about getting titles, promotions, a lot of that stuff, because that's what we're sold as success. If you get enough of those, if you rack up enough trophies, you'll make enough money, you'll be able to buy enough things and be happy. And I think upgrading that sense of achievement, that operating system, what drives you forward, is really valuable in midlife, because you start to realize like how much of that is the rat race, how much of that is just the ecosystem that we have grown up with in the West, and specifically America. That's about the American dream. It's about building bigger and better things for yourself. And switching over in midlife is a journey of realizing, my life is about giving back. It's about becoming someone who can give themselves away to others. It could be acts of mentorship. It could be acts of service towards other people. But you realize, I heard it said one time, you start to realize that your fruit grows on other people's trees. And I think getting to a place where that is second nature.
Yeah.
Redefining success, redefining your operating system, so that you get to a place of, like we talk about, sage eldership.
Yeah.
Like becoming sage
Okay.
in your life. A fount of wisdom, a fount of knowledge, a fount of love, a fount of giving away. And that's so different than, and not that building up a 401k or, having something to leave behind, that those are good things.
Yeah.
But the kind of like hit 60 something and coast for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I just don't think there's much meaning in that.
Yeah.
It is, 60s, 70s, 80s, even into 90s, becoming the kind of person that others want to be around because of who you are and what you have to pour into them. And you don't get that if it's about the rat race. You don't get that if it's about adding zeros to your bank account as if that's the most important thing.
So shifting from acquisition to like the giving back, looking for how your life can enrich others.
Yeah.
Is kind of like a lens, or like a model, I guess, for reinvention.
What I would say is, if you follow like the classic hero's journey meta narrative, the loop closes with self-actualization. That is not the truest story about us. It's about actually, instead of becoming the hero that comes back to save the day, it's actually growing up into the sage that trains up the next generation of heroes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the truest hero's journey. And I think we leave a gap.
Yeah.
By just self-actualizing and going, well, I got what I needed to become successful.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I think that, so a tension that I feel there, like, as you're saying that, is like, what if I didn't get what I wanted? in the first half of life? Like, what if I didn't actually acquire what I wanted or needed to? Like, what if I am not in a position yet to give back because what am I giving back? Like, maybe I haven't become the person that I am proud of, or maybe I have certain things to give back, but like I'm also really lacking in these other areas.
I don't know. I think there's always a point at which you can give back, give yourself to others, because some of the story could be, I failed, you know?
Oh my gosh.
And part of what we need to do sometimes is let go of achievement, of like, I have these tools, I'm going to keep using them until I rise up. Right. And it's like, I think I'm on the wrong mountain. I think I'm climbing the wrong mountain into my old age, and I need to kind of let it go and go, this is who I am. This is who I've become. I've learned a lot of things, and I can benefit someone else with those.
Yeah. So like, I think it's like letting go of even your own goals for yourself. Like, like if you're like, oh, you're in your first stages of life, the first 40, 50 years, and you go, okay, I want to have these, like this much experience. Maybe I want to have this many financial resources, assets, whatever, so that I can give back, right? Like you have a measure of what that would be. It's almost like you have to give that up, your own self-measurement, in order to reinvent yourself, like in order to go, like, oh, maybe I didn't really know what I was supposed to become.
Right.
Like
maybe that was someone else's goal imposed on me.
Yeah.
Maybe that was just a number I put down that I thought happiness equals this.
I feel like that's like a little bit hard to let go of for some people. I know for me, when I turned 40, I had this feeling like for the 6 months prior, I don't know if you remember this, I was like 39 and a half. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's all these things I should have done by now.
Sure. Yeah.
And I haven't done them. And so I can't proceed really into the next stage until I do that. Like it felt like a lot of pressure. It was like small, like administrative things to a degree, but I don't know. It felt like I wasn't ready.
So you probably didn't achieve all that.
No.
Do you live in regret right now? Or have you learned to let go of some of those things?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm still wrestling with that, to be honest. I don't think that I'm like, oh yeah, I feel great about every choice. Like I do have regret. I think regret is a teacher.
Sure.
It's like, oh, yep, I would have done that differently.
Sure.
And I feel okay about that. I think on some days I'm like, oh, what I didn't know and how I handled some things continues to impact me. And, I think like you talked about from that James Hollis perspective, sometimes this reinvention looks like grief. There's a grief element to it. Letting go of something is part of that. And if you don't address it that way, then you find yourself resisting, right? Because change is loss.
Right.
And sometimes the loss is like not what you have, but what you failed to get, what you failed to achieve. And the moment has changed.
Right.
And you have to be like, I have to accept that might not happen.
Like Henry Cloud wrote a book called Necessary Endings.
Oh, yeah.
It's about some of that, like learning to let go, being at peace with, things not happening, relationships that need to end, habits you need to stop, things like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Learning, I think that, it's also like this is just occurring to me now, so I'm going to figure out how to say it. Learning to see yourself differently. Like if you're reaching into your 30s and 40s and you're trying to achieve something, that's like part of the definition of your success, and you don't get there, then you see yourself as someone who can't achieve that. Like part of it is like, oh, I can't achieve the goals. I think I relate to that a little bit myself as I'm saying it. I'm like, oh, there's certain things that I feel like I wasn't capable of doing, that I didn't know how to do. I didn't have the resources or education I would have liked to have done. And so I came to see myself as someone who didn't know how to do those things. And I think even like you also have to let go of that.
Right.
Because you're going to have to adjust your standard of success.
That's right.
You're taking new things with you into the second half of life and leaving things behind. And so, your view of yourself, even your view of your capabilities and the measure by which you judge yourself has to change.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and I will tell you why that's important.
Yeah.
Like learning how to let go, learning how to have a necessary ending is because another thing that will help to reinvent yourself is doing something new. And you just can't pack in all the things.
Yeah.
Right? So you actually have to end something. You have to say, okay, I may never run a marathon or I may never whatever. Is that okay? Will I be okay? And answer that. And then shift into, here's something I always wanted to do, but that was too scary for me.
Wow.
Or here's something I wanted to do, but I kept putting it off. Right? And you may have to choose, like, what is more important? Training for a marathon or writing a book. And it's like, I don't have all the time and energy to do all the things.
Yeah.
Because I think in midlife, you especially run into your limits.
Yeah.
That are more diminishing usually. But, maybe it is, I want to run a marathon. And I've never taken my fitness seriously enough, my nutrition serious enough. I want to do that. I want to write a book. I want to launch a podcast. I want to, I want to, read the Bible all the way through in a year.
Yeah.
I'm going to look for a job. I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to look for a job in a field I actually am interested in.
Wow.
Instead of the one I told my parents I was going to do. What is it that kind of leads to this personal renaissance? Learning something new, doing something new. Like I learned that I really love hiking mountains.
Yeah.
In midlife.
Yeah.
And there's some training and some research and some things that go into that I really love. Travel is another thing that we found, like, our family really thrives when we're together doing that.
Yep.
So we're going to do what's possible and what's within reason to go and travel together and have those family moments. So it's that where it's like, if I always have this stuff hanging over my head about, like, well, I never got around to, maybe that's okay, because maybe what I always wanted to do is also right there in front of me.
Yeah.
And so what we don't want to do, I think, is get into analysis paralysis. But doing something new helps you feel like a new person.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I completely agree. And so that reminds me of, like, some old school Tony Robbins.
All right. Yeah.
People have some feelings sometimes about him, but I think he's got a lot of good stuff, and it's grounded in some great theory. One of those things that he will say is, like, when you're trying to change something about yourself, sometimes you have to take massive action.
Yeah.
So you have to, like, turn, like, 90 degrees, or you have to turn 180 degrees to really change the direction of your life. But then there's the follow through that is small and annoying and mundane and requires accountability, requires support, requires reminders going off on your phone.
Right.
Like, just the daily grind. So I think, like, for you're talking about massive action.
Massive action, yeah.
I'm putting this, hiking trip on the calendar. I am investing, hundreds, thousands of dollars in gear. I am going to learn all these things that I need to learn. Get my kid excited about it. All the different things that you've done, to invest. And then you have to go and run so that you can build up your VO2 max.
Right.
And you weight train and you eat nutrition, and research. So it's like a combination of things, that I think are part of it. I think that's like doing something new. In my Flourish community, some of the women are talking about doing something new as a thing. They're like, they want to do it. They're like, oh, there's something I want to try, but they feel this hesitation. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is such a thing. But it's like, the doing something new isn't just like, oh, I want to learn Spanish, so I'm going to download Duolingo. It's like, you can tell at this point in your life that what you choose to do is part of this reinvention.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think, like you talked about, people overthink it. They get into analysis paralysis, and it's like, what's been with you for a long time that you have wanted to do? And so, like, we're asking you that, as you're listening, like, what's emerging for you in answer to that question? What's the thing you've been wanting to do for a long time? I mean,
That's right.
You and I started a book 11 years ago, and ironically, the topic was about like, realizing and living out dreams. And then I got horrible postpartum anxiety and depression, totally derailed the project because I felt really hopeless for like a year. And so, and even how I would write that book would change now.
Yeah.
But like, it's like, oh, is that it? And I think even the idea of, oh, I have like 5 things I've wanted to do. How do I choose?
Just start.
It's like,
I mean, do something.
You know what I mean? Pick one of them because they're all represent a different facet of this part of you that's emerging.
Right.
So if you step into one of those, you're probably going to find that the others are more accessible.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of like, well, what can I do? If one of them is like, for me, I've been like, oh, I'd love to get my pilot's license. Yeah. And the training is like $17,000. And so it's like, okay, I'm not going to do that right now. But I now know. And so I'm going to do something, a little bit more accessible that, like you talked about, training for a marathon or something like that. That actually hasn't been on my list. I'm going to be honest.
Mine either.
It's like the feeling of boredom that I'm just like,
I've had a couple people ask me and I'm like, no, but I'll watch you and maybe I'll run a couple miles with you and that's it.
I know.
It's just not interesting. I have other things that interest me.
I have, my cousin and her husband like are always doing that. That's or like great. have some really amazing races they've done all over the world. And I'm like, you guys are awesome. But that hasn't been part of mine.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, this has me thinking even now about like taking what it looks like to take massive action on something that I.
Because you haven't done that enough in the last year.
I don't feel like I have.
Well, before you go too far down that road, and I think we probably need to kind of wind it down here a little bit. Is there anything else that you can think of that like would lead to a personal renewal or a new you or reinventing yourself?
I think the only other thing was just like reassessing your values.
Oh, that's good.
Because they change.
Yeah,
and and really also good. Some don't. And I think that's what when you say it's like, what do I carry with me forward, and what do I leave behind?
Yeah.
I noticed some of my values stayed the same, and some changed.
It's really true.
So
I wasn't thinking of that, but I think that is really huge.
I feel like values are just like criteria.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're like a framework that you can impose, and you can go, okay, if I'm going to take this massive action, and I have these things that I have wanted to do for a long time, I have to assess
That's good. Yeah.
Can I do it?
Right.
But also, does it match my values?
Yeah, true. I would add one thing as well. I would say sort of an upgrade to your mental health and physical health. Like maybe you're just holistic. Maybe that's a part of that operating system, but you're holistic, like what makes you for the long haul. Yeah. Right? Because it's just like in your 30s, you kind of get away. 20s and 30s, you kind of get away with some things, shortcutting some things. In your 40s and beyond, you're looking like, how long will I last doing this?
Whoa.
Right? Right. It's the fuel that I'm putting into myself, what I'm watching, what I'm listening to, the news intake.
Yeah.
Like, what is that doing to me? The food that I'm eating, the sleep that I'm getting, the alcohol that I'm drinking, whatever it is.
Yep.
Will that last until my 70s, 80s, 90s? Or do I need to make a change now? Yeah. And so I think, again, it's holistic. But I would say that's really important right now is to ask that question. It seemed like it hit you.
Yeah.
Like, how long will this last me?
Oh my
God. And maybe that's like as stark or as just direct as, what do I take with me? What do I leave behind?
Yeah.
And how long can I last doing this? I think more of us need to be asking that question.
That's such a good question. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, we had some good things in there. Can we recap just real quick?
Yep.
The kind of peer group, peer support network.
Yep.
We had what else?
Oh my gosh, we didn't write this down.
The second one that I said, the operating system.
Yes, like your assessment of success.
Success,
how
right?
How do you measure success?
Achievement, success, meaning, purpose, absolutely.
Yep.
Then you talked about
No, I'm blanking.
Like letting go. You talked a bit about letting go of things.
Yeah. Letting go of your previous like view of yourself.
That's right. Yeah. That's good. And then I talked about
the
how long can I? Yeah. Mental, emotional, holistic operating system.
Yeah.
And then you said values. And maybe those
values.
last two were switched.
Yeah.
So those.
So we'll have really to good. We'll have to kind of like create like a little guide or a little
absolutely.
one sheet on that. So that people can, because I think this is like, and I would really be curious, really, like if you, really as you're listening are thinking, oh, I feel like there's a missing thing that I used or am using to reinvent myself. Like we love to hear from you about that because, we're learning, we're still kind of like putting this together, but these are some of the things that we are literally like,
it's a conversation.
It's a conversation.
Yeah, that's good.
Absolutely.
Well, so what are you reading, watching, or listening to, and what's saving your butt right now?
Yeah. Well, I got back very briefly, but I might still do it. I love just old Frasier reruns.
Yeah.
I just love it. It's so comforting, and I find myself doing that in the winter. I've been reading a couple different articles in Wired and also New Yorker about like kind of espionage and warfare with Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah.
A couple of those that have been really fascinating. And so those are a couple that are coming to mind right now. So yeah,
that's good.
What about you? What are you?
I'm reading this James Hollis book.
Oh yeah.
Finding Meaning in the Second Half of Life.
You're like really in on that theme.
Yeah. Well, I'm
great.
really trying to understand it from a lot of different perspectives. So he's a Jungian psychologist.
Oh yeah. Okay. Like humanist perspective. Yep.
So it's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of kind of like family of origin, our younger selves, trauma that's happened, at least in the early chapters. So it's been really, really good.
Yeah, that's really cool. I am very interested to continue hearing about that. And as you know, this podcast seems to be a place where you can get book recommendations.
That's it. All the time.
I know. I have some other ones that I've just downloaded that I'm like, oh, what is that? But I can't access them at the moment. So
what's saving your butt?
Anyway, I think that it's been this little herbal concoction that I have every morning that I do that. It just helps me. It's a routine thing, but it's like it's a Dr. Morse thing. If you're looking, I have to go find it. But anyway, it's a digestive aid, and I just really appreciate it because it's helped me. Like I look back over the last year or so since I started taking it, and it's helped me just feel like more stable and balanced.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I appreciate it a lot. What about you?
I would say getting 7,000 steps every day. And really it's like my Apple Watch telling me how close or how far I am.
Yeah.
So it's probably a duo of that because I don't count in my head.
No, but you were talking about what that's done, the surprising effect of that, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
Like you want to drop that little hack in there?
My VO2 max is like shot up like crazy since December.
Yeah.
Me doing this like semi-regularly, probably 5 out of 7 days of the week, I'm at least 7,000 steps, and it's been crazy. Like VO2 max, as my Apple Watch is tracking, is higher than when I used to run like 10, 20 miles a week.
And he was training, you were doing 75 hard, like your VO2 max is higher than that.
Yeah.
So I think that's like actually really interesting.
Just the consistent, like I got a treadmill, I hit that in mornings, and then anything I need to get late at night. But then when I go to the gym, that's my warm up. I'm just walking. I might run a little bit, but it's really it's good. It's good for if you read good energy.
Yeah,
it's good for your metabolic health. So just overall, I'm just like, and it's just really.
It's like a tell for longevity, right?
Yes.
So you have like mobility, flexibility, grip, VO2 max, those kinds of like a dashboard.
Yep.
Information. So anyway, I thought that was really fascinating. I have like a almost analog step counter that
yeah.
doesn't tell my VO2 max.
That's
so
okay.
I just imagine that
You
it's
just
great.
imagine it. Yeah, absolutely.
It's so good.
I mean, if you're getting the steps
I'm
in.
not getting as many as you.
It's okay.
How long can I keep this up?
That's right.
Using
That's
your
it.
question, how long will this last me? Not long enough.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to make some changes. All right. Well, we're all reevaluating our lives now, aren't we?
That's right.
After this conversation. And, honestly, there's probably more like this. We as we kind of preview this, this could have some offshoot conversations related with it, because how can you cover reinventing yourself in 45 minutes? I don't think you can. So we may come back to this, but anyway, hopefully there was some food for thought for you today. Again, love to hear things that you think were missing from the conversation, or things you'd like to add, and what you've tried that's worked. Love that. And we'll be back here next week with another episode of In the Middle. So until next time.
We'll see you then. This is the In the Middle podcast with Josh and Sarah Siders. Visit inthemiddlecoaching.co for other resources, courses, and helpful tools.